Well, welcome to another session. Today, I am going to talk about the importance of doing the opposite, the exact opposite of what your instincts compel you to do, especially with regards to dating. To get things, I guess started. Let me say that. It's the norm in most dating experiences for men to pay for the dates or to spend a reasonable amount of money as a way of signaling to the woman that he means business, or he is very much interested in the woman. It's part of the courtship or courting process. My experience has been that in reality, doing the exact opposite usually creates a much more positive result for the man, although it goes against his instincts. My view has always been, and this is something that I've lived, it's something I've always done. My view was always, or my philosophy with dating was always, that firstly, love and war is something that is synonymous when it comes to dating, and that all is fair in love and war. And because dating is simply an art of deceit, it's important for you to recognize that the resources you allocate to dating, in most cases, is wasted, completely wasted, especially for men between the age of 18 all the way up to about 35. About 90% of all the relationships that you will encounter or be involved in will amount to absolutely nothing, especially those with the opposite sex. Seldom do relationships within that phase of life blossom into marriage and unionship and forever after. Usually these are short-term experiences, most of which, if you were to ask the woman involved 10 years down the line whether she remembers the date, she usually says no. If you ask the man whether he remembers the dates he had with a woman 10 years prior, he often says no. So my view has always been that the most important currency you have is your time. You trade your time for everything that you have in your life. You exchange your time for money. You exchange your time for relationships. You exchange your time for knowledge. You exchange that knowledge to solve a problem, and you're compensated for that problem you solve. So your time is your most precious resource. Most people usually think of money to be the most important resource they have. I believe it's time, because time is simply the one gift, or the one equal gift that we've all been given. Each day we have 24 hours. Every day, and what we do with our 24 hours determines what happens over the course of our life. Therefore, the art of spending as little as possible can be very, very effective. And by spending, I'm referring to spending your time, spending your resources, spending your money, can be very, very effective. Even spending your affection and emotion. In other words, investing as little as possible when you're dating. Now, I should also state this because I know that there are certain people who have a different concept of dating to myself. I put guys into three groups: preschool, 18 years and below, undergraduate 18 to 35, and then postgraduate 35 and above. Now, irrespective of what age group you fall into, or what group of the three you fall or find yourself in, dating is still the same. The purpose of dating for men is primarily to get sex, to have sex. At the core, The reason we go out on dates is for the purpose of having sex. Sex, on the other hand, unfortunately, in today's time, has become a commodity. Bumble, Tinder, all the dating sites, Instagram, all the social media sites have made sex a commodity. It costs nothing. So the idea that a man should still apply the same traditional courting process that was once used in the past to apply that principle in the modern scene is absurd. It's for that reason that I usually say you shouldn't spend more than £30, at the most £35, on a date. The way I look at dates is, if I see a woman, if I meet a woman, I have decided already in my head whether I would like to see her naked, whether I would like to sleep with her, whether I would like to pursue something sexually or get something sexual from her. The date traditionally used to be an opportunity for me to audition myself to her to see if she would be willing to reciprocate the same aspirations that I have, or to give her the opportunity to see if I am worthy of allowing me in to her, you might say her body. Women generally are gatekeepers to their body and their womb. The woman controls who she allows herself to become intimate with and who she allows herself to become sexually active with. But even more importantly, the woman decides who she allows or who she gives the honor of actually providing life or bringing life into the world on his behalf. So, because women are gatekeepers to their bodies, we audition for that opportunity for sex. Traditionally, this meant that before social media and before the likes of all the online websites, even pre-Facebook, you're talking about the likes of Craigslist and a few others, before the days of the early internet, the best way a man could actually date a woman was either to meet her outside, in the bar, in a club, or socially, hopefully get her number and ask her out on a date. Today, you don't have to do that because the auditioning process has been reduced thanks to technology. So all you need is a profile. She has a profile. You can provide as much information on that profile in order to give her an understanding about whether she finds you attractive. So if I was on Tinder and you, the woman, were on Tinder and you saw my profile, you would see photographs. I would have a description of who I am, what I like. Assuming we match, the fact that we match means that you find me attractive. That is step one. Step two is that we begin a communication process. In the communication process, you get the opportunity to ask questions, and I get the opportunity to present myself in the best way forward. That means the idea of who you believe I am, you can generate some interest by the answers I provide. And therefore, if we decide to meet, assuming you're happy with your initial engagement with me and you're happy with the way I presented myself online, although we haven't met in person, there is an opportunity for us to meet in person. As a matter of fact, even before we meet in person, you could decide to begin initial communication with me over the telephone to see if, for example, you like my banter, you like the way I speak, whether we have things in common other than having to be clever in writing words, whether there is some congruency between what I say in words and what I say verbally. All of that allows the woman to effectively critique, to identify whether she is happy and willing to participate in the whole process of dating, which is purely sex. Now, if the woman decides that she's happy with what she has seen, then a date is set. My perspective, especially in modern day today, is once the date is set, in effect, the assumption is that there will be an exchange, a fair and mutual exchange of sex. Most men have the wrong concept of thinking that they have to outperform through various social graces in order for them to be rewarded for sex, or by being rewarded by the gift of sex. I think very differently. If we're both equal, and assuming, and I believe this to be correct, the woman has an equal opportunity to have an orgasm if there is sex that takes place, as I do, then it's a mutual benefit to both parties. As a matter of fact, the woman has an opportunity to have multiple orgasms compared to the man who needs some time to recover. So, all things remaining equal, it's a fair exchange. Therefore, both parties equally have to play a part and pay the price to be involved or to be given the opportunity. I think men, you have to get it out of your minds as though you have to do all the work and the woman is the one giving you the gift of sex. No, it takes two. It's a mutual exchange. Technically, the way this would work is if there was going to be a date, I should be paying for your time and you were paying for my time. At the end of that period, we decide on whether we move forward. Now, my experience has been that a woman decides in advance whether she's going to have sex with you or not. So the performance the man puts forward by taking her to a lovely restaurant and buying champagne and spending so much money and being a gentleman, that might enhance the timing of when that happens, but generally the decision on whether she has made that acceptance, whether she's accepted you emotionally or spiritually, that decision takes place before the art of wining and dining. For that reason, I say that you should spend as little as possible on dates. Ideally, no more than £30 on a date. Preferably, and this is what I had done back in the day, was to suggest that we meet up for drinks. Preferably, it was usually drinks after dinner because most of my time was spent working. Therefore, I found, and this is something I had to learn using hindsight, I found that I occasionally spent a lot of time at work, sometimes on Saturdays. So I would normally call up and say, what are you doing later this evening? Nothing. Okay, great. What time do you normally have dinner? 7:30, 8? Great. Can we meet at 9 p.m. for drinks? By doing that, I'm allowing myself the opportunity to finish from work. Sometimes I'll be at work till 6:30 on a Saturday. I need time to go back home, get changed, sometimes get something to eat. Haven't been at work all day before getting dressed and heading back out. What I found was that it was quite effective in terms of me saving my money. My intention originally was not to save, although I would recommend that should be your intention. My intention originally was that I was just too busy. By the time I finished work, it was easier for us to meet later because I didn't want to be seen to have delayed or not kept to the original schedule for dinner. Because during the weekdays, I found I worked long hours and I usually never had dates on a weekday, although occasionally on a Friday at the end of the week. But even then, on a Friday, I found that I would be in the office sometimes until 6:30, sometimes 7. And usually whenever I made dates on a Friday evening, I ended up arriving very late. So my preference was just simply to say, what time would you normally have dinner? And say, can we meet after dinner once you're done? I found this to be effective because it meant I saved so much money, wasting money on dates. I could arrive and we could just have a drink. Now, I recommend that you do this actively rather than passively like I did. And the whole idea is for you to recognize that if most of the relationships that you have between 18 and 35 will amount to nothing, it doesn't really matter how much you spend on a date. If the woman wants to have sex with you, she will. As a matter of fact, keep in mind, and this is something I had to learn, the same woman who might be of the perspective that it's important for you to wine and dine her and to treat her well, to a nice restaurant, to good bottles of wine, that same woman has probably had a number of one-night stands with people she met who she was very attracted to on the first date, and within a few hours had sex with them, and had multiple more occasional sex with other people who paid nothing. This is not an auction whereby you're trying to bid for something that has never been used. Sex is a commodity. The idea of dating is to recognize that your focus should be to get as much sex as you can and pay the least possible. A woman's role is to get as much resource as she can and give up the least amount of sex as possible, which is why I call it war. The person who plays that game better wins. Now recognize that most women will disagree with my position. They will call it cheap, they will call it unnecessary, unfair. My experience has been that women simply want your money. Irrespective of what they say, even those who are strong, independent, educated, have good careers, they want your money. They want you to pay for everything. They expect you to pay for their presence. They expect you to pay for their time. They expect you to pay indirectly for sex. They want you to pay for their maintenance. If you get married, they want you to pay for the wedding. If you remain married, they want you to pay for all of the upkeep. If you get divorced, they also want you to pay alimony and pay for their support until they found at their feet. So it's a natural expectation from a woman. However, from a man's perspective, your focus should be to give up as little resources as you can, and in exchange, get the most that you can. I should perhaps make it very clear, I am not talking about when you're dating someone who you have identified as someone you're dating with the intention of marrying. In other words, dating with a purpose in mind. Between 18 and 35, and for those who are not 18 yet, but have already started dating, the purpose of dating is simply for men is to have sex. I am of the view that you should not pay for sex. I've never paid for sex. I refuse to pay for sex. I refuse to pay for a woman to take her clothes off. I refuse to pay for anything that requires some form of a tease from a woman to do what she would normally give for free to other men. I refuse to pay for that. Now, I don't have an issue taking it out or taking a total stranger out for a meal, for dinner, or supporting them. But if I believe that it's connected to some form of condition for the exchange of sex, I disconnect. Now, I have been to bars where I do not buy drinks for women. I go with my friends. I buy drinks for my boys. I buy drinks for my mates. That's fine. Very different. I take my boys out for dinner, to restaurants. Very different. But for a woman, I do not pay for drinks or solicit sex using financial means. I have been to bars where I've met people and I'm bold enough to say, I like this drink, please. And usually the look on their faces is usually stunning. They can't believe that a man is so bold and is asking for a drink. And occasionally some of them would say, no, well, you should be the one who's the gentleman paying for the lady's drink. And my response is always usually quite simple. I'd like to see you have some skin in the game first. It's unconventional. It goes back to the statement I made at the start, which is for you to do the opposite, do the exact opposite of what your instincts tell you to do. Occasionally, you might find that most women might find that to be slightly unusual. If you deliver that in a convincing way, in almost like you've heard me say in one of the prior sessions, to be indifferent towards sex. A man's need for ejaculation is so powerful, so strong. A man's need for sex is so powerful, so strong, that it exudes an aura. It's like an animal in heat. A woman can sense and smell a man who is in heat from a distance. On the other hand, a man who is confident, who really couldn't care less about sex, who is indifferent to sex, either because there is someone else, there is a book where he can call someone and say, listen, I need to have a need met, and the person shows up, either because he has a list of people who are providing that service, or either because he just doesn't care. It makes no difference which of the two. But if a man has his needs met and he has a rota of available willing participants, there is an aura of indifference about you. My experience has also been that the more you spend, the more you spend on the woman, hoping to get sex in exchange, the less you will get in sex. On the other hand, the reverse applies. The less I spend, usually, the more of a challenge it becomes for the woman, because in principle, the way they think is they think, number one, he's confident. He believes he's going to get something for nothing. Number three, they see that as especially when you're dealing with attractive women who've always had men come up to them and say, I'd like to buy you a drink, I'd like to pay for your dinner, I'd like to take you out, I'd like to take you shopping, I'd like to take you on holidays. When someone comes in and says, no, you've got two hands, you've got two legs, you seem like an educated, intelligent woman, so you make your own money, so pay for yourself, and whilst you're at it, whilst you're placing that order for the drink, I would like, a glass of X. They see that as something that is very unusual. They see you as one of two things. You have to either be a big dick, an idiot, an irritation, or you're intriguing. And I have found most women, even if they find you to be in the first category, if you say that in a charming way, if you say that in a respectful way, if you're well dressed, if you're well spoken, if you're playful in how you go about your interaction, intrigue is usually what overrides the irritation they have initially. They're intrigued. And I would say maybe 9 out of 10 times, I've had people pay for my drink or pay for my food simply because I asked. I guess in many ways, guys, you have to get really good at what I call the 3-letter word. A-S-K. Really that simple. For me, when I'm dating someone, or when I was still single and dating, it was a game of let's see who has a greater will. And that meant I wanted the woman to always have some skin in the game. I have found, and this works, in my opinion, this works. You can take this to the bank. I have found that it is much harder for a woman to pay for the first date and walk away and not call you again or not progress with the interaction, that is much harder. Much harder than for you to pay for the date or pay for the drinks and she walk away. Put it more simply, a woman who pays for the date, whether that be the first date or the second date, has something invested in you. She's invested her time, because her money is simply a derivative of her time. Let's say you make £10 an hour and you take me out for dinner and you pay for dinner and you pay £30 for the date. That's 3 hours of your time. On the other hand, recognize that you pay taxes in order to get £30. So technically, perhaps you have to work in time currency, you have to work for 4.5 hours in order to take home 3 hours worth in cash. So she's invested 4.5 hours is half a day. Half a day is half a day in life terms on a yearly basis. So you've invested half of one day. Remember, your life is today. Your life is not something out there. It's simply your lifetime is a combination of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But your life is today. Therefore, if you invest half your day to take me out on a date, you've invested half your life in me. And I have found that a woman who pays for the first date or for the second date now has skin in the game. It's harder for them to walk away on the first date compared to if you, the man, had paid for the date. Remember, you made the payment, they've invested nothing, therefore they can walk away. So in conclusion, my recommendation is for you to think about the whole dating scene to be like war. Not a very romantic saying, not a romantic way of looking at interactions between male and female. But in modern society today, dating is not what it used to be. As a matter of fact, a woman who finds you attractive based on your spending ability or based on what you're able to purchase for her is nothing more than a whore. It's a prostitute. A prostitute is someone who exchanges a gesture or a service for money. If you have met someone and there is an implicit expectation that you have to spend money, a certain amount of money, you have to take me to this particular type of restaurant or bar or function or event, you have to spend so much on me first before I can open my legs. Anyone who says that is a prostitute. Implicitly, they're saying they're trying to sell their body to you. My recommendation is very simple. If you're going to pay for sex, then why don't you pay a professional? You know what you're getting. You can tell them what you want exactly. There's a duration of time. And at the end of the experience, both of you walk away mutually satisfied. You've got what you wanted. She's got what she wanted. That is a fair exchange. A woman who wants you to spend money before they can actually show affection and intimacy, or before they let you in for what I believe is a mutual exchange, the opportunity to be pleased and the opportunity to please another. A woman who does that is no different from a prostitute. So your instinct might want to get you to be a gentleman, to put down your credit card, to pay for the entire meal, to take it to somewhere very expensive. I beg to differ. I would recommend instead that you get yourself a cookie jar. And let's say you have an expectation of £30 is what you would spend on the date. And let's assume you have 4 dates scheduled. Each week or each weekend for the month. Here's a recommendation. On the first date, before you leave the house, take the £30 and put it in the cookie jar and go out without money. And let your ingenuity guide you. If you cannot find a way to make an interaction with a woman interesting enough, then that means you're generally boring. Because on a first date, personally for me, I find interaction, especially if it involves food, to be slightly uncomfortable. I'm eating with a stranger, someone I don't know. I'm having to calculate and check, and she is as well, concerned about whether there's food on her mouth, and how she's eating, whether she's making noise with her with a knife and fork, whether she has the social etiquette, whether she has the table manners, all of that nonsense. If I want to have a meal, I have it with my friends. But in any case, take the £30, put it in your cookie jar, and go out on a date. And let's see if you have game. Better still, get her to pay for the date. Or find a way to make the date an interesting experience without food. On the second date, do the same thing. On the third, do the same thing. By the end of the fourth week, assuming you've been disciplined and successful, you would have saved about £120. Now, I did a session where I explained that if you were to save £120 roughly, between £120 and £200 per month, and you invested that in, say, the S&P 500 stock index, or a low-cost index fund, between age 18 and age 35. Let me use £200 just to illustrate how important and how serious this is. £200 every single month will amount to $2,400 every single year. Between 18 and 35, you have 18 years. If you multiply 2,400 by 18, for the sake of this conversation, let's call it £46,000. Split the difference. I could be wrong, it doesn't matter. £46,000. We'll round it up to a round number to make everyone happy. £50,000. That's what you would have saved if you were putting that money in a cookie jar every year over an 18-year period. That £50,000 is enough for a deposit on a house. If you bought the house intelligently at 10% in terms of your return on investment, that house will pay you 10% return if you had that house rented. However, what I'm suggesting is not that you save the money. I'm suggesting you invest the money. If that £200 every single month is invested in a low-cost index fund for the 18-year period, what should have been £50,000 will be at least £220,000. Not only could you have one house, you would then have £220,000, which you could invest in a number of homes and build a portfolio of assets. The point I'm making is that every single day, you should see each date as you taking a seed. And rather than planting that seed in the soil to produce more fruit, you're actually tossing that seed into the ground for the birds of the air to eat. You're wasting money. The same principle applies to women. You're wasting money on dates. Again, this is war. Whoever can achieve what they want for men, sex, by giving out as little or expending as little resources as possible, wins. For the woman, you should be seeking to obtain as much resources as you can from the man, but you should give out in exchange as little sex as possible. Whoever wins that game wins.